my name is Ingrid. I'm a psychologist at Westpsych Therapy Center, and we're continuing with a series on the brain. So today we'll be talking about the hindbrain, which is located here at the back of the head, and it's also called the reptilian complex by some. So the hindbrain consists of the brainstem. There's a little part of the brain called the amygdala, which is an almond-shaped part of the brain, and cerebellum, which is at the back of the brain, which is also involved with balance and coordination. So the hindbrain is involved with the survival state. In other words, it's your body's alarm system that gets activated when there is a perceived threat. So the core question that the hindbrain would ask, so to speak, is, am I safe? This means that our actions seek safety. It's an unconscious, automatic response. So if you think about putting your hand on a hot stove plate, you don't really think about that, do you? You automatically just pull your hand back to protect your hand from being burnt. And that's pretty much what happens when we're operating from this part of the brain. We respond in an automatic way to protect ourselves. Now, the hindbrain has 4 strategies that it uses to protect us. And you might know some of them. The first one is the flight response. So flight response is our attempt to avoid the danger, to avoid the threat. And it's associated with fear and anxiety, but it's a sympathetic nervous system response, meaning that our bodies produce a lot of cortisol and adrenaline. Blood flows from the skin and the internal organs to the muscles so that there can be a lot of oxygen that gives us that ability to maybe run faster. The next thing that the brain might choose as an option to protect us from danger is the fight response. So the fight response is associated with attacking and defending ourselves, and what motivates that as an emotion would be anger. So the fight response is technically an approach response. We move towards the enemy or the threat, and it's also a sympathetic nervous system response that activates our bodies so that the heart beats faster and that our muscles work harder, and the digestive system at that point doesn't operate. Another potential response is what we call the Hypo-freeze response, and that is when we can't really fight or flee. We might feel stuck and trapped, and so what we do is we play dead. It's not conscious that we're playing dead. We just take on that state. Our body takes on a state of rigidity or shock. It's associated with terror, and we might even dissociate when we're in this phase. Now, Peter Levine has done a lot of research on trauma, and what he has found in his research is when we're in this freeze state, we actually have a lot of energy that's still stuck in the body, but we can't use the energy to fight or flee. In other words, we are very much operating like a spring that is spring-loaded with a lot of energy, and we're ready to do something with it, but it's locked in our bodies. So this can potentially lead to PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, if it's not processed. Now, the natural way that the body would normally help to resolve this internal stuck energy would be to tremble, to shake after a traumatic experience. And that's very helpful to try and restore the body to a more normal state. Now, we know that with PTSD, some of the typical symptoms then would be hypervigilance, hyperarousal, nightmares, those kinds of symptoms that is associated with a sympathetic nervous system response. Now, the fourth option is we could go into a hypo-freeze state. So that means it's a parasympathetic nervous system response, which means it's the opposite. It's a shutting down or a deactivation of the body. And basically what happens in that state is we collapse, we faint, and it's associated with dissociation, meaning that it feels as if we're not connected to our bodies at that point in time. Now, the dissociation, of course, is a protective mechanism so that we don't experience that trauma as intensely as we could have potentially have experienced it if we were fully in that moment and aware of that moment. So these are the four responses when we're in a traumatic state. And that concludes our little series on the brain. And I hope you learned something. I'll see you again.